The wind rolled across the dry plains, like a warning whispered by the earth itself, carrying dust, secrets, and stories no one dared to repeat. Sunlight spilled over Miles Hartman's ranch, stretching shadows across the faded barn, the broken fence rails, and the lone oak tree that stood like an old sentry at the edge of his land. Miles had always been a quiet man, the kind who preferred the company of his horse to the noisy world of people. He lived by his own rules, shaped by scars he hid behind his beard, a thick, rugged beard that was more than just hair on his face. It was history. It was identity. It was pain he didn't want to remember, and that was exactly why his closest companion, a bold traveler named Ilara Finch, said the one sentence that froze his blood: "You shave, and I'll kill you." Her voice was steady, though her clothes were torn, her boots dusty from the long ride across the desert. She had arrived at his ranch 2 days earlier, half-starved, insisting she was being hunted by men who wanted something she carried, something that could change everything for everyone. Miles didn't ask questions. He never did. He simply gave her water, food, and a safe bed in the old guest loft. But Ilara was no ordinary runaway. She noticed things, too many things. She noticed how Miles never let anyone close. She noticed how he touched his beard every time he was nervous. She even noticed the small tremor in his hand the night he found her crying on the porch. She had seen men like him before, men hiding stories they never dared to tell. The beard was his shield. She knew it. He knew it. And that was why her warning sliced through him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He was terrified, because she had spoken a truth he didn't dare face. That night, Miles had sat alone in the barn, staring at a worn photograph of a woman with gentle eyes, and a smile too soft for the cruel world she lived in. He touched the edge of the picture. "Clara," he whispered. His wife, gone, taken from him by a group of bandits 5 years ago. And the day she died, Miles made a vow. He would never shave the beard he had grown during the search for her, the beard that carried the dust of every place. He had looked but never found her. It wasn't just hair. It was grief. It was loyalty. It was a grave marker that no one else could see. But the man hunting Ilara, a ruthless outlaw named Briggs, knew Miles, knew his weakness, knew that the one way to break him was to break the symbol he carried on his face. So Briggs sent a message carved into the barn door at dawn. "Shave it, Hartman, or she dies." A threat, a trap. But Briggs didn't know Ilara. She stood in the doorway as Miles read the message, her hair tangled from sleep and her face pale but fierce. "Listen to me," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "You shave, and I'll kill you myself. Do you understand? That beard is the only thing keeping you from falling apart." Miles didn't answer, his jaw clenched, his chest tight. For the first time in years, someone understood. Ilara wasn't protecting his beard. She was protecting him. That afternoon, Miles saddled his horse and told Ilara to stay inside, but she refused. She grabbed his rifle, slung it across her shoulder, and said, "If you go, I go." And so they rode out, together, toward the scrubland where Briggs's men had last been seen. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with burning hues as a storm brewed on the horizon. They rode through tall grass and broken trails, through silence and stories they were too afraid to tell. When they finally reached the ravine, they found a campsite, abandoned but still warm. A knife stuck into a piece of firewood held another note: "Last chance. Shave it at dawn. Come alone." Ilara ripped the note apart in fury. "They want your beard because they want your fear," she snapped. "They want to strip you bare so you're easier to kill." Miles stared at the ashes of the fire. His chest ached, his mind churned, but something in him began to shift. He wasn't the same broken man he had been 5 years ago. He wasn't helpless. And Ilara wasn't someone he needed to protect. She was someone who stood beside him like an equal. That night, under the cover of darkness, they made camp far from the ravine. They spoke little, but when the fire died and the stars appeared, Miles finally whispered, "What did you carry that made Briggs hunt you?" Ilara hesitated before pulling out a small metal cylinder from her bag. Inside was a map, hand-drawn, showing a hidden settlement of families Briggs planned to raid. "If this gets into the right hands," she murmured, "we can stop him." Miles stared at the map. Then he stared at his hands, hands strong enough to fight, to protect, to build. And he knew what he had to do at dawn. Not shave, fight, but Briggs would not wait, and neither would fate. By morning, the rancher would pull down, and he would do the unthinkable. Dawn broke like a blade slicing through the sky, sharp and cold, illuminating the quiet plains in shades of gold. Miles stood near the lone oak tree on his ranch, staring toward the horizon where Briggs and his men would be waiting. The heavy silence wrapped around him like a noose, but Ilara's words echoed in his mind. "If you shave, I'll kill you." She hadn't spoken in threats. She spoke in truth, in fear, in warning. She knew what shaving the beard would do to him. It would crack him open, bring back memories too heavy for any man to carry alone. And she refused to watch that happen. Miles exhaled slowly, gripping the reins of his horse as he prepared to ride into danger. But Ilara stepped in front of him, her face marked by determination, defiance, and something else, something like faith. "You're not going alone," she said. Miles opened his mouth to argue, but she cut him off. "No, you don't get to make that decision. Not after everything we've been through." Before he could respond, a gunshot echoed across the plains. The bullet hit the dirt near Miles's boot. Briggs's men emerged from behind the hill, rifles raised, smirking. "Morning, Hartman," Briggs shouted from atop his horse, twirling a knife in his hand. "Ready for your shave?" Miles's stomach tightened. The threat was real. The danger was unavoidable. Briggs dismounted, walked toward Miles, and held the knife to his beard. "On your knees," he hissed. But Miles didn't kneel. He didn't flinch. Instead, he looked Briggs dead in the eyes and pulled down. He grabbed Briggs by the wrist, yanked him downward with all his strength, forcing the outlaw into the dirt. The motion was sudden, brutal, unexpected. Briggs didn't have time to react. The knife slipped from his hand. Miles tackled him, pinning him to the ground. The men around them gasped. The rancher had done the unthinkable. He wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't hiding behind grief. He was fighting to live again. Ilara was already in motion. She fired a warning shot overhead, forcing the other outlaws to scatter for cover. Miles and Briggs rolled across the dirt, kicking up dust. Years of rage, from his wife's death, from the emptiness that followed, surged through his veins. "You took everything from me," Miles growled, tightening his grip. "And now you want what little I have left?" Briggs spat in Miles's face. "You're already dead. You just don't know it yet." But Briggs underestimated one thing. Miles wasn't alone. Ilara ran toward them, swinging the rifle like a staff and knocking Briggs's remaining men away. She moved with fierce precision, as if she had been preparing for this moment her whole life. Miles finally overpowered Briggs, pinning him with a knee to the chest. "You want my beard?" he said quietly. "Then take it." Briggs's eyes widened just as Miles reached down, pulled the outlaw's own hunting knife from his belt, and slashed straight through. Briggs's belt, slicing it clean off. Not flesh, not skin, not blood. Just the belt, the symbol of Briggs's power. Briggs froze in humiliation as his belt, his holster, and his reputation dropped into the dirt. The unthinkable wasn't violence. It was humiliation, mercy. A man like Briggs lived on fear and dominance. Taking that from him was worse than any bullet. Briggs crawled back, trembling. His men looked at him with shock and shame. "Get off my land," Miles said, voice low, "and never come back." Briggs stumbled to his feet and fled, his men following in terrified silence. The plains finally grew quiet. Miles dropped the knife, breathing hard, as Ilara walked toward him. "You didn't kill him," she said softly. "No," Miles replied, "but I took away what he cared about." Ilara stared at his beard, dusty, tangled and still intact. "I knew you wouldn't shave," she whispered. Miles looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting in the faintest hint of a smile. "Because you told me not to," he said. They rode back to the ranch, the morning sun warm on their backs, the past snow longer dragging miles into darkness. That night, after tending to the horses and fixing the fence Briggs's men had broken, Miles sat on the porch with Ilara beside him. The air smelled of pine, smoke, and new beginnings. "What now?" she asked. Miles looked across the horizon. "Now," he said, "we deliver that map, and we save those families." Elara leaned back, letting the quiet settle. "You know," she murmured, "for a man who doesn't talk much, you're not half bad at doing the right thing." Miles chuckled. "A rare sound, a healing sound." "Stay here," he said gently. "Stay and help me fix what I've let fall apart." Elara didn't answer right away, but the way she rested her head on his shoulder said enough. The ranch was no longer silent. The ghosts were no longer loud. And for the first time in years, Miles Hartman wasn't alone. As the stars filled the sky, Miles looked into the camera of destiny and spoke his final words of the day. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe. There are more tales on this land, and we're just getting started.